My name is Lorraine, and at 57 years old, I thought I knew everything about my late husband Robert and the life we had built together. When he passed away 2 years ago, after 34 years of marriage, I believed he had left me with just our family home, a modest savings account, and memories of a quiet man who worked hard in real estate. I was wrong about almost everything. What Robert actually left behind was so much more than I ever imagined, but when I discovered the truth, I made a decision that would change my relationship with my son Michael forever. I kept it secret, and that choice saved my future in ways I never expected. Before I share what happened next, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below, and please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories. Trust me, you will want to hear how this family secret changed everything. Robert and I first met when I was 23, fresh out of college and working at a small accounting firm in downtown Denver. He was this quiet, methodical man who owned a few rental properties around the city. Nothing fancy, just a duplex here, a small apartment building there. He would come into our office every month to have his books reviewed, always carrying that same worn leather briefcase and wearing his navy blue jacket that had seen better days. Our courtship was slow and steady, much like everything else Robert did in life. He proposed on a snowy December evening in Washington Park, and we married the following spring in a simple ceremony at St. Mary's Cathedral. Michael came along 2 years later, and we settled into our three-bedroom ranch house in Lakewood, the same house where I still live today. Throughout our marriage, I handled our personal finances while Robert managed his real estate investments. I knew he owned several rental properties, maybe 4 or 5 scattered around Denver and the surrounding areas. He would leave early in the mornings to collect rent-fix leaky faucets or show apartments to potential tenants. When he came home in the evenings, his hands would be dirty from repair work, and he would wash up at the kitchen sink before dinner, rarely talking about his day or the details of his business. Michael grew into a serious, studious boy who excelled in mathematics and economics. He attended the University of Colorado Boulder on a partial scholarship and landed a position at First National Bank right after graduation. At 32, he had already climbed several rungs up the corporate ladder, married his college sweetheart, Sarah, and given us 2 beautiful grandchildren, Emma, who is 7, and Tyler, who is 5. After Robert's funeral, I found myself rattling around our empty house, surviving on Social Security and what I believed was our modest nest egg of about $20,000. The silence felt overwhelming after decades of Robert's quiet but constant presence. I took a part-time position at the Jefferson County Library shelving books and helping patrons with research, partly for the small income but mostly for the human contact and routine. Michael began visiting more frequently after his father's death, usually on Sunday afternoons after church with Sarah and the children. He would walk through the house with a concerned expression, checking the thermostat settings, examining the grocery receipts I left on the kitchen counter, and asking increasingly pointed questions about my monthly expenses. His wife Sarah would trail behind him, making sympathetic noises about how difficult it must be for me to manage alone on such a limited income. The neighborhood where we lived was quiet and established, filled with families who had raised their children and were now enjoying their retirement years. Our house sat on a corner lot with mature oak trees that Robert had lovingly maintained and a back garden where he had spent countless hours growing tomatoes and roses. It was the kind of place where neighbors knew each other's names and looked out for one another, exactly the kind of community Robert had wanted for our family. 2 weeks after Robert's funeral, on a gray Tuesday morning in November, I received an unexpected phone call from someone named Benjamin Walsh. He introduced himself as an attorney and explained that he had been Robert's legal counsel for over 15 years. He needed to meet with me regarding estate matters that required immediate attention, matters that apparently could not be handled over the phone. I drove downtown to his office building on 17th Street, feeling anxious and confused about why Robert would have a lawyer I had never heard of. The elevator climbed to the 20th floor, and I found myself in a sleek law office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Rocky Mountains in the distance. Benjamin Walsh was a distinguished man in his early 60s with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He invited me to sit in a comfortable leather chair across from his massive oak desk, then opened a thick file folder that seemed to contain documents spanning many years of my life with Robert. What he told me next left me completely speechless. Robert had not owned just a few small rental properties as I had believed. He owned 12 separate rental properties throughout the Denver metropolitan area, ranging from single-family homes in established neighborhoods like Wheat Ridge and Arvada to a 12-unit apartment complex in Boulder. Additionally, and this was the part that nearly made me fall out of my chair, He was the sole owner of Riverside Shopping Plaza in Lakewood, a thriving retail center with 8 different stores and a popular coffee shop that I had actually visited many times without knowing my husband owned it. Benjamin spread the documents across his desk, showing me property deeds, mortgage statements, and rental agreements. The numbers he showed me were absolutely staggering. The monthly rental income from the 12 properties alone exceeded $5,000, and the shopping plaza generated another $3,000 monthly in lease payments from the various businesses. Robert had also maintained substantial savings and investment accounts that I knew absolutely nothing about, accounts that had been growing steadily for over 2 decades. I sat in that leather chair staring at documents that proved my husband had been quietly wealthy, not just comfortably middle class as I had always believed. The man who had worried about spending $20 on dinner at a restaurant had been systematically building a real estate empire worth well over $2 million, and he had never said a single word about it to me. Benjamin explained that Robert had established everything in a carefully structured trust that would provide for me completely while protecting all the assets from potential creditors or legal challenges. He had even arranged for a reputable property management company to handle the day-to-day operations of the rental properties, meaning I would receive steady monthly income without having to deal with maintenance calls, tenant disputes, or late-night emergencies. The most shocking revelation was yet to come. Robert had specifically instructed Benjamin that I should have complete control over whether or not to disclose the inheritance to our son Michael. Apparently, Robert had witnessed Michael's increasingly controlling tendencies over the years and wanted to ensure that I had the freedom and financial independence to make my own choices about how to handle our family relationships going forward. As I drove home that afternoon through the familiar streets of my neighborhood, my mind raced with questions and conflicting emotions. How could Robert, the man who had shared my bed and my life for 34 years, have hidden something so significant from me? Why had he felt the need to keep these assets secret even from his own wife? But underneath the confusion and hurt, I felt something else growing stronger with each passing mile, a sense of power and possibility that I had never experienced before in my adult life. That evening, sitting alone in our living room surrounded by Robert's books and the furniture we had chosen together, I made a decision that would change the course of my relationship with my son forever. I would keep Robert's secret at least for now. I wanted to see how Michael would treat me when he believed I was struggling financially and needed his guidance. I needed to discover whether his concern for my welfare was genuine love or whether there were other motivations behind his sudden intense interest in managing my affairs. Within a month of Robert's death, Michael's visits became noticeably more frequent and significantly more intrusive. He would arrive unannounced, usually during my lunch hour when he knew I would be home from my library job, and begin what I came to think of as his inspections of my household management. He started with subtle suggestions about the impracticality of maintaining such a large house. Standing in our living room, he would gesture toward Robert's empty recliner and comment about how much space I was wasting in a 3-bedroom house when I was living completely alone. He questioned the necessity of heating rooms that I rarely used, and he calculated aloud how much money I could save by moving into a senior living community where maintenance and utilities would be someone else's responsibility. The grocery receipts became his particular obsession. Michael would pick up my shopping lists and receipts from the kitchen counter and scrutinize every single purchase with the intensity of an accountant reviewing corporate expenses. He questioned why I continued to buy name-brand cereals when generic versions would provide the same nutrition at half the cost. He could not understand why I purchased fresh flowers for the dining room table every week, or why I continued to buy Robert's favorite Colombian coffee when I was the only one drinking it now. His concern extended to my utility bills, which he began requesting to review each month like some sort of financial overseer. Without asking my permission, he installed a programmable thermostat and set it to temperatures that left me shivering in my own home during the cold Colorado winter. When I adjusted it upward for basic comfort, he would deliver lectures about the environmental impact of energy waste and the strain that heating bills were putting on my supposedly fixed and limited income. The most painful intrusions involved my small personal indulgences, the little luxuries that made daily life enjoyable. When Michael discovered that I had maintained subscriptions to Better Homes and Gardens Reader's Digest and a gardening magazine that Robert and I had enjoyed together, he actually canceled all 3 himself without consulting me, explaining that I could read the same content for free at the library where I work part-time. He replaced my cable television package with the most basic service available, arguing that someone my age did not need premium channels or movie networks. He questioned my purchases of paperback novels, my occasional meals at local restaurants, and even my decision to continue the weekly house cleaning service that had helped me maintain our home for the past 5 years. Sarah supported her husband's interventions with a kind of saccharine sweetness that made my teeth ache. She would pat my hand sympathetically while speaking to me in those exaggerated, overly patient tones that people use with small children or individuals they consider mentally impaired. She praised me enthusiastically when I accepted their cost-cutting measures without argument and expressed disappointment bordering on disapproval when I showed any resistance to their increasingly frequent suggestions. During one particularly difficult Sunday afternoon visit, Michael brought his laptop computer and spent over an hour creating what he called my financial runway analysis. He built detailed spreadsheets showing exactly how long my savings would last at my current spending levels versus the dramatic budget cuts he was recommending. According to his projections, which he presented with the confidence of a professional financial planner, I would be completely destitute within 5 years unless I made immediate and substantial changes to my lifestyle. The emotional manipulation was subtle, but absolutely relentless. Michael would sigh heavily whenever he discussed my finances, creating an atmosphere of crisis and impending doom that hung over every conversation. He spoke frequently about his sleepless nights worrying about my future, his growing anxiety about my ability to manage independently, and his sense of responsibility as my only son to protect me from what he clearly saw as my own poor judgment and financial irresponsibility. Throughout these increasingly uncomfortable visits, I maintained my facade of grateful acceptance while secretly documenting every instance of his controlling behavior. I was conducting my own experiment, gathering evidence of exactly who my son revealed himself to be when he believed he held power over me and my circumstances. The situation reached its absolute breaking point on a cold Tuesday morning in February. I was sitting in my kitchen enjoying my morning coffee and reading the Denver Post when I heard car doors slamming in my driveway with more force than usual. Through the kitchen window, I watched Michael stride toward my front door with a confident, determined gait that I had never seen before. Behind him walked a woman in a navy blue business suit carrying a professional briefcase and what appeared to be measuring equipment and a camera. Michael let himself in, using the spare key I had given him years earlier for genuine emergencies, calling out loudly that he had brought someone to help resolve my housing situation once and for all. The woman introduced herself as Jennifer Martinez, a real estate agent who specialized in helping senior citizens transition to more appropriate and affordable living arrangements. Without asking my permission or even acknowledging that this was my home and my decision to make, Michael began giving Jennifer a comprehensive tour of my house. He pointed out features that he claimed were becoming problematic for someone my age and in my financial situation. The staircase to the second floor was potentially dangerous for someone with aging joints. The large yard required expensive professional maintenance that was straining my budget. The neighborhood itself was becoming too costly for someone living on Social Security and a small savings account. I followed them through my own home like a ghost, watching in stunned silence as Jennifer measured rooms, photographed architectural details, and took notes about the property's condition and potential market appeal. She commented professionally on the house's excellent maintenance, the desirable corner lot location, and the mature landscaping that increased its value. She estimated confidently that the property could sell quickly in the current Denver market for a substantial profit that would solve all my financial concerns. Michael had clearly done extensive research in preparation for this ambush. He produced glossy brochures from several senior living facilities in the area, featuring photographs of smiling elderly residents engaged in arts and crafts activities, spacious communal dining rooms serving nutritious meals, and comfortable transportation services for medical appointments and shopping trips. He spoke enthusiastically about the social opportunities these communities provided, the freedom from home ownership responsibilities, and the peace of mind that came with professional medical care readily available. The final straw came when Jennifer began discussing specific listing strategies while sitting at my kitchen table as if she already had my permission to proceed. She recommended minor staging improvements like fresh paint in the living room and professional cleaning of the carpets. She suggested an aggressive pricing strategy that would generate multiple offers within the first week on the market, ensuring a quick sale and immediate access to the equity I needed for my future care. Michael nodded approvingly at every suggestion, occasionally adding his own ideas about timing and logistics. He began calculating out loud how much money would remain after paying off the remaining mortgage balance and covering moving expenses, treating my life savings and my family home like line items in a business transaction. I listened to them plan my entire future without consulting me about my own preferences or feelings, treating me like an incompetent child who lacked the mental capacity to make decisions about her own life. The kitchen, where Robert and I had shared thousands of meals, where Michael had done his homework while I prepared dinner, where we had celebrated birthdays and holidays and ordinary Tuesday evenings for over 30 years, was being discussed like a commodity to be liquidated for maximum financial return. The moment that crystallized everything for me was when Michael pulled out his personal checkbook and began writing Jennifer a check for her initial consultation fee. He was literally paying someone to sell my house without having asked me if I wanted to sell it. This was not concern for my welfare or genuine worry about my future. This was about control and possibly about his own financial interests in whatever inheritance he expected to receive. That evening, after Michael and Jennifer had left with promises to return the following week with official listing paperwork and a photographer, I sat alone in Robert's favorite armchair and made the decision that would change everything. It was time to show my son exactly who he was dealing with and exactly how wrong he had been about my situation. I spent the next 3 days carefully planning what I had begun to think of as my revelation dinner. This was going to be a performance, and every detail needed to be perfect. I called Michael and Sarah on Thursday evening, inviting them to bring Emma and Tyler for a special family meal on Saturday. I explained that I had something extremely important to discuss regarding my future plans, and I could hear the satisfaction and relief in Michael's voice as he eagerly accepted the invitation. I decided to prepare Robert's favorite meal as a tribute to his memory and his Forsyte slow-cooked pot roast with carrots and potatoes, creamy mashed potatoes with real butter-fresh dinner rolls, and his beloved apple pie with vanilla ice cream for dessert. As I cooked throughout Friday and Saturday, I carefully organized all the documents Benjamin Walsh had given me, arranging them in neat stacks on the sideboard in the dining room hidden beneath my grandmother's decorative lace tablecloth. Saturday evening arrived cold and clear, with snow beginning to fall gently outside the windows. Michael and Sarah arrived promptly at 6 o'clock with the children, who immediately ran to hug their grandmother with the uncomplicated affection that only grandchildren can provide. Sarah complimented the wonderful aroma of dinner cooking and commented hopefully that she hoped I had not spent too much of my limited grocery budget on such an elaborate meal. Michael surveyed the dining room table set with my good china crystal glasses and silver candlesticks and reminded me gently but firmly that such extravagances were exactly the kind of unnecessary expenses that had been causing him so much concern about my financial management. During dinner, I kept the conversation deliberately light and pleasant. Emma, who had just turned 7, chattered excitedly about her upcoming role as a flower in her school's spring play. Tyler, at 5 years old, was completely fascinated by a bright red bicycle he had received for his recent birthday and wanted to describe every detail of its features. I savored these precious moments with my grandchildren, knowing that everything was about to change dramatically and permanently. After we finished the apple pie and I had served coffee to the adults, I set the children up in the living room with their tablets and headphones, giving them access to their favorite games and videos. I returned to the dining room where Michael and Sarah waited expectantly, clearly anticipating that I was about to announce my decision to accept their guidance, sell the house, and move into one of the assisted living facilities they had researched. Instead, I walked deliberately to the sideboard and retrieved the thick stack of legal documents I had hidden beneath the tablecloth. I placed them carefully on the table directly in front of Michael and Sarah, watching their faces closely as I began to speak in the calmest, most measured voice I could manage. I told them that their grandfather Robert had been significantly more successful in his real estate business than any of us had ever realized during his lifetime. I explained that he had left me with substantial assets that would provide very comfortably for my future assets that made their concerns about my financial security completely unnecessary. Then I began showing them the paperwork document by document, revelation by revelation. The first document was the deed to a 4-unit apartment building in Westminster that generated $1,800 every month in rental income from reliable long-term tenants. The second was ownership paperwork for a duplex in Arvada that brought in another $1,200 monthly. One by one, methodically and thoroughly, I revealed all 12 properties that Robert had quietly accumulated over 3 decades of careful strategic investing. Michael's face progressed through a fascinating series of expressions as I continued my presentation: initial confusion and disbelief, followed by growing embarrassment, and finally settling into obvious anger and resentment. Sarah's jaw literally dropped open as she began calculating the monthly income streams I was describing, quickly realizing that I earned significantly more money from rental properties alone than Michael made in his full-time banking position. The shopping plaza documentation was my final and most dramatic revelation. I showed them color photographs of Riverside Shopping Plaza, the comprehensive lease agreements with 8 thriving local businesses, and the monthly income statements that proved this single asset generated more money than most people earned in full-time professional careers. When I finished my presentation, the dining room fell into complete silence except for the distant sounds of my grandchildren's videos playing in the next room. Michael stared at the documents spread across the table. His face flushed deep red with what I recognized as a mixture of shock, humiliation, and barely controlled anger. Finally, he found his voice and demanded to know why I had deliberately hidden this information from him for months. He accused me of lying to him, of manipulating him, of allowing him to worry unnecessarily about my financial security, while I knew perfectly well that I was financially comfortable. His voice rose steadily as he listed all the time and energy and genuine concern he had invested in trying to help me manage what he had believed were my very limited resources. Sarah attempted to smooth things over with her characteristic diplomacy, suggesting that perhaps there had been some kind of misunderstanding, that Michael's concern had been genuine and well-intentioned. But her eyes kept returning to the property documents spread across the table, and I could see her mentally recalculating all of their assumptions about my net worth and their own family's financial position relative to mine. I allowed them to vent their frustration and confusion for several minutes before I responded. Then, speaking in the calmest and most controlled voice I could manage, I explained exactly why I had chosen to keep Robert's legacy secret from them. I told them that I had wanted to observe how they would treat me when they believed I was vulnerable, dependent, and in need of their guidance and protection. I had wanted to discover whether their concern for my welfare was motivated by genuine love and respect, or whether it masked other motivations that were less admirable. The results of my experiment had been clear and deeply disappointing to me as their mother. The weeks immediately following my revelation dinner were uncomfortable and tense for everyone involved in our family. Michael attempted several awkward phone calls and visits to apologize for his behavior, but his explanations consistently focused on defending his good intentions rather than acknowledging the actual impact of his controlling and condescending actions. He insisted repeatedly that everything he had done was motivated purely by love and concern for my well-being, completely missing the fundamental point that love without basic respect is not truly loving behavior at all. Sarah's response was more calculated and transparent in its motivation. She began visiting me independently on weekday afternoons, bringing small gifts like fresh flowers or homemade cookies, and offering to help with household tasks that I had never requested assistance with and did not actually need done. Her sudden attentiveness and interest in maintaining our relationship was obvious in its purpose, but I appreciated that she was at least making a genuine effort to repair the damage that had been done. The most significant and immediate change was in Michael's entire approach to our interactions. The confident, directive tone he had adopted after Robert's death disappeared completely and permanently. He became hesitant and uncertain in my presence, asking permission before touching anything in my house, apologizing repeatedly for suggestions that had previously been presented as non-negotiable demands, and treating me with a careful politeness that felt artificial but was certainly preferable to his previous condescension. I used this transitional period to establish clear and firm boundaries about our future relationship. I explained to both Michael and Sarah that I would continue to manage my own finances and make my own decisions about my living situation, my spending habits, and my daily routine. I made it absolutely clear that any future advice or suggestions would need to be specifically requested by me rather than imposed upon me, and that my personal choices were not subject to their approval, disapproval, or oversight. During this same time period, I also began actively and enthusiastically managing the inheritance that Robert had left me. I scheduled regular meetings with the property management company he had carefully selected, reviewed applications from potential tenants for vacant units, and took personal tours of all the retail businesses operating in my shopping plaza. The coffee shop in particular fascinated me with its cozy atmosphere and steady stream of loyal customers. It was owned by a young couple named David and Maria, who had transformed a simple beverage counter into a thriving community gathering place that hosted book clubs, art displays, and acoustic music performances. I discovered that being a property owner suited my personality and interests in ways I had never expected or imagined. I genuinely enjoyed making decisions about necessary improvements and routine maintenance projects, and I found deep satisfaction in providing quality, affordable housing for working families and young professionals. Robert had chosen his tenants very carefully over the years, selecting responsible people who would treat the properties with respect and maintain them properly. The financial freedom was absolutely intoxicating after decades of careful budgeting and constant worry about unexpected expenses. I could afford to travel to places Robert and I had always discussed visiting. I could eat dinner at nice restaurants without calculating the impact on my monthly grocery budget. I could buy generous gifts for my grandchildren and make substantial donations to causes that mattered to me, including a significant contribution to the Jefferson County Library System, where I continued to work part-time because I enjoyed the work, not because I needed the income. My relationship with Emma and Tyler remained uncomplicated and joyful throughout this entire family upheaval. They were too young to understand the adult drama surrounding money and property ownership, and they simply enjoyed having a grandmother who could afford to take them to movies and museums, buy them books and toys without hesitation, and surprise them with special outings and adventures. Their innocence and unconditional affection provided a welcome contrast to the tension and awkwardness that now characterized my interactions with their parents. As spring arrived in Colorado, I began seriously planning a trip to Ireland and Scotland that Robert and I had always talked about taking, but had never actually scheduled. I researched guided tours of the countryside and small group travel options specifically designed for mature adults. The idea of traveling alone to foreign countries was both terrifying and exhilarating, representing a kind of freedom and independence that I had never experienced at any point in my adult life. 18 months have passed since my revelation dinner, and I can honestly say that keeping Robert's secret was one of the most valuable and important decisions I have ever made in my life. The experience taught me invaluable lessons about human nature, family dynamics, and my own hidden strength and capabilities that I would never have learned through any other means. Michael and I have slowly and carefully rebuilt our relationship on an entirely new foundation based on mutual respect rather than his assumed authority over my life. He has started attending weekly counseling sessions with a therapist who specializes in what she calls control issues stemming from anxiety about uncertainty and change. The therapeutic work is difficult and sometimes painful for him, but I can observe genuine, measurable changes in how he approaches not just our mother-son relationship, but also his interactions with Sarah and the children. Sarah and I have developed what I would describe as an understanding that is honest and functional, if not particularly warm or emotionally close. She has admitted to me that she was influenced by her own fears and anxieties about financial security and aging parents, and that she unconsciously projected those worries onto my situation. While our relationship will never be deeply intimate or genuinely close, it has become respectful and comfortable for both of us. The grandchildren remain the brightest and most joyful aspects of all our family gatherings and celebrations. Emma has begun asking thoughtful, intelligent questions about money management and property ownership, showing an entrepreneurial spirit and business curiosity that strongly reminds me of her grandfather, Robert. Tyler is completely fascinated by the apartment buildings and always wants to visit the shopping plaza to see what he proudly calls Grandma's businesses. I hope to teach them both about financial responsibility, smart investing, and the deep satisfaction that comes from building something worthwhile and lasting. I have also discovered aspects of my own personality and capabilities that remain completely hidden throughout my 34-year marriage. Robert was a good man and a loving, devoted husband, but our relationship followed traditional patterns that naturally limited my independence and personal growth. His unexpected death forced me to develop confidence and competence in areas where I had always automatically deferred to his greater knowledge and experience, and managing his substantial business legacy has revealed capabilities I never knew I possessed. The property portfolio continues to thrive and grow under my direct oversight and decision-making. I have authorized significant improvements to several rental units, updated kitchen appliances in the apartment complex, and worked closely with the shopping plaza tenants to enhance the overall customer experience and attract new businesses. Last month, I approved the installation of electric vehicle charging stations in the plaza parking lot, a forward-thinking investment that will attract environmentally conscious customers while generating additional monthly revenue. I successfully completed my dream trip to Ireland and Scotland, traveling with a small group of other widows who had become close friends through a grief support group at our local church. Standing on the dramatic cliffs of Mercer, looking out over the endless Atlantic Ocean, I felt Robert's presence more strongly than I had at any time since his death. I finally understood that his decades of secrecy had not been about distrust or desire to control me, but about love and protection. He had wanted to ensure that I would never be vulnerable to anyone who might try to take advantage of my grief, loneliness, or perceived helplessness. The most profound and lasting lesson from this entire experience has been learning to understand the crucial difference between genuinely caring for someone and attempting to control them. True care respects the other person's fundamental autonomy and inherent dignity. It offers support and assistance without undermining confidence or creating unnecessary dependence. It expresses legitimate concern without imposing unwanted solutions or taking away personal choice and freedom. I think about Robert constantly as I make important decisions about our properties and investments. I often imagine him smiling with pride at my newfound confidence and competence, pleased that his formerly shy and deferential wife had grown into a self-assured businesswoman who could hold her own in negotiations with contractors, real estate agents, and financial advisors. Sometimes I actually talk to him out loud when I am reviewing monthly financial statements or considering major improvements to the properties, asking him what he would think about my choices and whether he approves of the direction I am taking. The house that Michael had been so eager and determined to sell remains my sanctuary and the base of operations for my new life. I have made it truly my own space, redecorating rooms that had remained virtually unchanged for decades, converting Robert's cluttered home office into my own organized workspace, and creating a flower garden that reflects my personal taste and preferences rather than purely practical considerations. As I sit here now in the peaceful garden that Robert planted with such care, surrounded by the rose bushes he selected and the fruit trees we planted together when Michael was still a small boy, I feel overwhelmingly grateful for the unexpected journey that brought me to this point in my life. Grief and devastating loss opened doorways to personal strength and independence that I never knew existed within me. Robert's greatest and most lasting gift was not the money or property he left behind, but the opportunity he provided for me to discover who I could become when I stopped limiting myself to who I had always been. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the opportunity to show you who they really are when they think they have power over you. Money does not change people fundamentally. It reveals their true character. In my case, it revealed not just the true nature of those around me, but also my own remarkable capacity for growth, strength, and independence at any stage of life. And that revelation has made all the difference in the world. Have you ever discovered something about a family member that completely changed how you saw them and your relationship with them? Or maybe you have had to set firm boundaries with someone who meant well but was trying to control important aspects of your life. I would love to hear about your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you in any way, please give it a like and subscribe to hear more real-life stories about family relationships, personal growth, and finding your inner strength when you need it most. Please share this video with someone who might need to hear that it is never too late to stand up for yourself and take complete control of your own life and future. Thank you so much for listening to my story and for being part of this community. And remember that your worth and value are never determined by what others think you need, but by who you choose to become. Until next time, take care of yourselves and always trust your own judgment and instincts.